Hello everyone, I'm Kevin, otherwise known as Form BX257, here to bring you another 1980s G.I. Joe tour review. And today I'm going to be taking a look at the Cobra Crimson Guard Commanders, the 1985 Tomax and Xamot, sometimes known as the Crimson Twins. Now these evil twin brothers make their first comic book appearance in the Old Marvel comic run of G.I. Joe in issue number 37. And make their first cartoon appearance in the 1985 season opener of Part 1 of Pyramids of Darkness, sometimes known as the episode titled The New Adventures of G.I. Joe. One very interesting thing about them is that while it does say that their code names are Tomax and Xamot, they are actually supposed to represent their real names, just like Destro and Zartan. Taking a look at Tomax and Xamot's accessories first. They come with a pair of pistols. It would have been interesting if the pistols had a reversed mold, just like the Tomax and Xamot figures did. But fortunately, you don't have to worry about that. Especially if you're looking for parts for these figures on the aftermarket, you don't have to worry that you're getting a specific Tomax or Xamot gun. They are the exact same gun. Here, I just have them reversed here, so you can see either side of the details on the gun. But the thing is that I'm not really sure what these guns are even based on. They don't look familiar to me at all. Of course, some guns in the G.I. Joe universe actually are real guns, but they're just so modified that the details just sort of escape me. But here they look like target pistols with really long barrels with maybe a shroud over that. But it has very interesting detail, like this knob which is right underneath the trigger guard, as well as a knob underneath the hand grip itself. The knob on the trigger guard, I don't really understand that. Could be like a safety or something. And the one on the bottom really reminds me of how the Europeans used to have a latch on the bottom of the grip for the magazine before, modern guns sort of moved it up closer to where you're actually handling the gun. And also, very interestingly, they have a really big scope, but it's very stylized. It's very swoopy, kind of like a SUSAT scope, which is a British scope, usually on assault rifles, so I'm not really sure what's going on there. But if anybody knows what these are based on, or may have like an idea, please leave a comment, because I'd be really interested in that. And finally, they come with what the contents list on their very unique card calls a Skyhook. But we know this more or less as a zip line today. It is a unique hook with included rope. And of course, it has handholds on either side. And here's a close-up of the Skyhook. It's not really that remarkable, to be perfectly honest. But as you can see, my original rope is actually coming undone because it's really that old and has been used quite a bit. I have a replacement rope here, which you can find online for fairly cheap. It's like $1 or something, or probably even less. But I like to keep the original as long as possible. You're supposed to just take the two ends and rope them up against something solid like a doorknob. Normally this string is about 2 to 2.5 feet long. I find positioning the arms like this while holding on to the Skyhook is the best way, so that they're not sort of angled into each other and they look a bit more natural. Of course, the question everyone asks is, which one is Tomax and which one is Xamot? Well, Tomax is the one with the pristine face, and Xamot is the one who always has the scar on his cheek. I always remember that because Xamot starts with an X, which to me is like something which it gets crossed off. Just like a scar on his face, he's been sort of checked so that he doesn't look like his brother. Now normally I let you, the viewer, read the file card for yourself, but there is one thing that I really want to point out to you, because it's something that the file card lacks despite a massive amount of information about these brothers, and that is the fact that it doesn't mention that one brother feels what the other one does, no matter the distance between them. That is something which was developed in the comic books and in the cartoons, but is seriously, strangely, not on the file card. Now, Larry Hama wrote both the file card and the comic pretty much at the same time, so I'm a little curious as to why he doesn't mention it here. Larry Hama actually had a very vocal reaction to supernatural things and, very alien things in the comic book. And he just wouldn't include them, like how Zartan actually changes color and things like that. He just wouldn't include them in the comic book. But in this case, he actually did, simply because the whole psychic link between the brothers was actually something from a literary source, which Larry Hama really appreciated. It's clear that Tomax and Xamot were based on the Corsican Brothers. The brothers themselves had a psychic link. It's very interesting because when you think of people with superpowers, you actually think of modern comic books. You don't think of novels written almost 200 years ago. I have to admit, it took me a really long time for me to really appreciate the Tomax and Xamot action figures. And there was really two reasons for this. But the first one, which I'll note first, is they're really strange outfits. It really took me a long time for me to just really appreciate that. But one of the biggest factors in me appreciating that is when I realized that they have a really good pre-1986 Cobra color scheme, with the dark blues, the dark reds, the silvers, and little black on them. It really does integrate them with what Hasbro was doing for the color schemes of Cobra figures prior to 1986. However, the sculpt is still very, very strange. Starting from the top down, they have these weird popped collars on one side. And they have little rivets, meaning that they are supposed to be metal. I guess it goes along with the shoulder pad which they have on that same side. But the thing is that while this looks like cool European armor, there isn't really enough of it on the figure. They have bare arms and pretty much bare chests. You would think that if they would continue on with this sort of European armor look, it would at least be on the chest. They have a sash, which I'm not really going to complain about because just a bare sash is kind of a mark of old school European kind of uniforms. But then going right back to the metal, we have a little crotch piece. And we have full metal boots here. I'm not really sure that would be terribly comfortable, but at least the knee pads just sort of detail of a Cobra head, which is kind of nice. But like I said, it's a very ignorable sculpt, I would say, simply because of how nice and very integrated into the Cobra Legions the colors are. And yes, I do realize that they are supposed to be Crimson Guard commanders, and they don't have a lot of crimson on them. But again, I think that sash really just says it all, with the little pops of the dark red all over them. They don't really need to emphasize that they are Crimson Guards by wearing crimson. Another problem I had with appreciating these figures, with almost a year of owning them, was that I thought the sculpts were lazy. I mean, to be honest, if you wanted to make a twin with the opposite look, you just take a negative mold of that and call it a day. Or, if you were in the modern era, you would take a CAD drawing or a 3D print and just reverse it. However, that's not what they did. I'm not sure if it wasn't possible back then, but these are definitely two different sculpts. If you take a look at some of the details, like a shoulder pauldron rivets, they are actually different. Things like the guns on their sides here, those are slightly different. And even the angle of the knives on their boots are slightly different. There's no way that a negative mold would produce that. The only way you get that is if you sculpt them separately. That is just amazing dedication and something which I really appreciate. And here are Tomax and Xamot with the legions that they command, the Crimson Guard. And as you can see, even though the Crimson Guard are almost head to toe red with no blue whatsoever, honestly, I still think that they go really well together, and the blue really emphasizes that these guys are the leaders. And if you take a look at their file card, honestly, it really does have a really clear emphasis on industrial espionage, accounting, law, and things like that, which really are what the Crimson Guard are made to do. In a way, being the leaders of the Crimson Guard, they are kind of a sub-team leaders, but honestly, I think they're pretty high in the Cobra chain of command, which kind of leads me to wonder exactly who are the opposite numbers on the G.I. Joe team? Well, I can really only think of these two, Flint and Lady J. Flint being a sub-team leader under Duke, and of course Lady J having the espionage background, and both of them working together really well. Normally I don't discuss the packages for G.I. Joe toys because other than some really cool original artwork, which is sadly missing in today's world, there isn't really much to discuss other than that. However, this is the first time in maybe like a decade that we get gimmick packaging for the figures. Now, I say a decade because back in the 1970s, the Adventure Team Bulletman had kind of a gimmicky kind of card to him, which was really, really different from all the other figures that were being released at the same time. And that's the same thing with this. At its heart, it's an oversized card, which would have hung with the rest of the regular size cards and basic figures at the time. However, this one is oversized because it has the edges folded into these little triangles here on both the sides as well as the bottom, creating a little odd ramp here. It has artwork on the front and completely different artwork on the back. And of course, the columns are formed by these little triangles, have silver stickers which create a mirrored effect. So not only do we have two of the same figure, it's kind of reflected off on kind of a funhouse mirror type of a deal on the sides here. And speaking of funhouse mirror, back in the 80s when the commercials for the comic book, issue 37, which introduced Tomax and Xamot, were out, they and the G.I. Joes were fighting in an amusement park, which, to be honest, that was kind of another nail in the coffin for these guys, for me, because I didn't really like circus type things. I thought that was a little corny back then. But it actually does go really well with the storyline. There is a variation for Tomax and Xamot, the Xamot scar on his face. Early versions of the figure at retail had a very large red painted scar, and very noticeably different than the common version which I have, which is the small pink scar. I can see why Hasbro would get rid of it, because honestly, if you didn't understand that this was a scar, it would either look like a really bad paint job or that he was bleeding. For a while, this version of the figure was worth quite a bit more than the regular retail, but as they become more common, the values have just equalized to about the same amount as the regular vintage figure. In late 1988, Tomax and Xamot, as a set, were available through mail order. Interestingly enough, the variant actually carries over with the Xamot figure here, leading me to believe that this is where overstock of the original Red Scar figures from the original retail run wound up. However, I could be wrong about that. This mail order special actually lasted right up until 1991, meaning that there are quite a lot of Tomax and Xamot figures out there, which is one of the reasons why the aftermarket value for the figures is a bit low because, well, they are in quantity, and of course, they are individual figures and not army builders, so they're not really that in high demand. Now, this is primarily how I display my Tomax and Xamot figures, as tank commanders for Crimson Guard vehicles, such as this SMS. You also have the 1985 Crimson Guard CAT tank, but that's only a one-seater, so you have more flexibility displaying Tomax and Xamot in a multi-seater like the SMS. However, this is not my original idea. That actually comes from how the vehicles were marketed back in 1985 through Sears, there being a Sears exclusive after all. And this is the Wish Book from Canada, and this is where you get the third way that Tomax and Xamot were actually retailed. Now on the right side of the magnificent two-page spread, we have the price for the individual 2-pack of Tomax and Xamot. But on the left side, for the vehicle listing, we actually have a discount if you buy one of the vehicles with Tomax and Xamot. Now this is a bit controversial because some people have maintained that if you bought one of these, the figures were actually stuffed inside the Canadian versions of the SMS or the CAT boxes. Personally, I don't think there's enough room inside the CAT box, but there definitely is inside the SMS box. But still, I really don't believe that there's either a bagged version of Tomax and Xamot inside a sealed version or a crushed up individual card in any one of these boxes. I feel that Sears in Canada would simply have just given you the regular retail card and just given it to you with the sealed box with nothing extra inside. But I have really no evidence to the contrary that that's what was happening. In the G.I. Joe Field Manual, which collects the model sheets which were used for Sunbow animation, you can actually see the error that they actually started off with here, because they've actually mirrored how Tomax and Xamot actually should look, with Tomax having the scar on his right side, whereas the figures, and of course how it was depicted in the comic books, have it on his left cheek. If you're looking for a Tomax and Xamot on the aftermarket, I actually have to say that they're fairly easy to find, complete with their pistols. The one thing that you do have to look out for, however, is their Skyhook, especially with the string. But, well, the string can be had as a reproduction, and I don't think that really matters all that much. One thing that you do have to look out for, however, are two things. One, to make sure that Tomax and Xamot have their correct body parts, because you can take these things apart and mix and match them, especially if a part is broken. So you have to make sure you're actually getting this exact figure and how everything is exactly placed on his body for Tomax here and Xamot here. Of course, you do also have to look out for whether or not you're getting the originals from 1985, if that's what you want, because they were reissued in 2002. The figures released in 2002 for the A Real American Hero collection differ in significant ways. The colors are all sort of more subdued. The blue is duller, the red's kind of brownish almost, and of course the heads are painted differently. While on the originals the hair is kind of auburn, which shares the same color with the eyebrows and the eyes themselves, on the reproductions the eyes are black. Actually knotted up against the but here we have evidence of Hasbro's first. So how's everyone liking those double ads that YouTube's been playing lately? Aren't those fun? It's no wonder creators are going off and doing Patreon. Good lord, what is YouTube doing these days? But on the left side, for the vehicle listing, well, that's all the time I have right now. Please check out my Facebook page for more information and behind the scenes photos for these reviews. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for next time to see another 1980s G.I. Joe toy review. See you then.